Hey lovelies, today I wanted to talk about divine feminine. We have touched on it in the previous talk about feminine embodiment, but here I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the history and desecration of feminine. So let's start with divine feminine as an aspect of God consciousness, a goddess, a divine mother, the creatrix of all life, however we want to call her, is that aspect of creation, of divine consciousness that majority of us feel completely separate from and disconnected from. In modern world, we are predominantly presented with the model of spirituality where we have a patriarchal God figure, a male God, and a transcended consciousness, which is the consciousness which transcends body. Essentially, it's a God and consciousness that lives outside of the body in the ethereal realm. So to worship this God, this archetype, it kind of requires and asks of us to detach from the body, from the earth dimension, from the carnal, and connect into that heavenly realm, that transcended consciousness that exists outside of the body. Then when we talk about feminine aspect of consciousness, it's an quite opposite. The divine feminine lives in the body. It's life, it's expression, it's matter, it's form, it's self. So to connect to that aspect of divine consciousness requires an opposite, requires the full and total presence and embodiment. She is that thread of consciousness that isn't something formless, ethereal that you cannot grasp, something unattainable, something you have to put your faith into and believe into. She is the form of and thread of consciousness that is tangible and can be directly felt through the body, through the experiences of life. So what happened? How come that we as a collective separated from this aspect of consciousness, and as a result from our primal self, the intelligence of soma, of body, the intelligence of earth, Gaia consciousness? Well, that goes back 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, where prior to that, we lived as a pagan traditions, shamanic traditions, across the entire globe. We honored the earth, we honored the body. Across every tradition, every belief system, we had multiple goddesses. Every tradition had the goddess of love, the goddess of fertility, which was directly connected to life, to the sacredness of life itself, of body. We honored the earth, we honored elements. We were fully inhabiting this vessel and experiencing divine, experiencing sacred through body, through life, through embracing life. And then the great shift happened. Nobody exactly knows what was the root cause of the great shift, but prior to great shift, when we were the earth people, where we honored body and earth, where the main religion was the earth-based religion across all of the nations, across all of the different tribes, our center of gravity sat in the pelvis, in the pelvic bowl. So we were deeply connected to Shakti, to Kundalini, to Yin energy, which is that innately feminine, divine feminine energy. So we would connect to life and move through life from this center. This is the center of sensuality, sexuality, creativity, deep intuitive wisdom, and direct connection to source, to goddess consciousness. And then the great shift took place, and our consciousness, our full way of being, which is, by the way, the most natural and organic to us, moved into the higher wisdom center, the head. And that marked the birth of the logic, of rationality, of transcendent consciousness. And while I believe this is a very important shift and it had to take place in order for us to connect deeper into the formless, into the cosmic consciousness, into the eternal consciousness, what happened at that time is that the head, the mind, the ego structures took over, and the systematic eradication of feminine consciousness, feminine aspect of reality, feminine aspect of God, of creation took place. So it wasn't just something that happened on its own. We became head people, we disconnected from the body, we disconnected from the divine mother consciousness, from the goddess consciousness, from the goddess of love, sensuality, sexuality, creativity, intuitive wisdom. We were forced, and it happened across the entire globe. We were forced to disconnect from the earth consciousness, from the goddess consciousness, from the divine mother consciousness. And for those who live in Europe and carry the lineage of Christianity, we went through horrific dark ages time of Christian crusades and inquisitions and so-called witch hunts, where as much as 7+ million people, 90% of which were women, were persecuted, horrifically tortured, burned and killed, and were turned against one another as one of the most cruel campaigns that have ever existed to eradicate feminine, to eradicate that divine feminine consciousness. Why? Why women? Well, because feminine holds a tremendous power. And it's in a direct conflict with that new order of patriarchal God, of patriarchal institutions, which is all about control, manipulation, all about disconnection from the body, from the earth, detachment, and in a spiritual terminology, transcendence, where the heaven, the ultimate liberation, has been placed in this ethereal place of consciousness. And in order to access that, we are made to believe that we have to disconnect from the body. We need to disconnect from the pleasures of earthly life. And we have to worship something that lives outside of it, of this realm. The earthly became a profane, sinful. So that is in a direct conflict with what Divine Feminine teaches. Divine Feminine is all about sacredness of life, sacredness of Gaia, of earth, sacredness of body, intelligence of Soma, the primal wisdom. It's not about separating the soul from the body. It's about merging these two. It's about connecting the formless and form, the body and the spirit. It's about embodied God, experiencing God and Goddess consciousness through day-to-day living, through tending to our homes, through tending to the earth and gardens, through making love, through birthing children, through creating art, through dancing and singing and making and crafting things, through rituals, through ceremony. So feminine was in the direct conflict with how patriarchal order wanted to rule. And feminine is all about empowerment. When you know that you can experience God directly through your body, that you have direct access to the communion with God consciousness, when you know that you are a powerful creator and creatrix, it is impossible to deceive you. It is impossible to manipulate you. It is impossible to make you do something that you know innately is not right. It is impossible to use you and abuse you, because you are innately empowered being. You are sovereign being of light. You are sovereign creator. So feminine was too threatening to the masculine that wanted to dominate, to control, to assert the will, the power upon the masses. So it had to be eradicated. It had to be brutally killed and fear-induced and turned against one another, and as a result turned against herself, in order to desecrate, to stain, to eradicate the feminine, the divine feminine consciousness on the planet Earth. And, you know, it greatly succeeded, largely. A lot of us walk upon this earth feeling completely disconnected from Divine Mother, from the Goddess of Love, feeling completely disconnected from our body, from our sensuality and sexuality, especially women, from our feminine essence that isn't something external, and it's about the looks, and it's about what we wear and how our face look and what body shape we have, but it's innate. That connection to our sensual life force energy, to our sacred sexuality, that connection to our intuitive wisdom, the deepest knowing that transcends any philosophy in the world, any logic and rationality. The deep creative expression. Majority of us women feel completely disconnected and dissociated from this part of consciousness, of ourselves, of our body. And the simple test of it will be to check in how present are you in your pelvic bowl? How present are you in your womb? How present are you in your yoni? How present are you in your ovaries? Every day, on a daily basis. Versus, for instance, how present are you in your head? And I think majority of us can agree that it's 99% of the day. We in the head, we in our thinking mind. When we in the head, in our thinking mind, we either leaning constantly forward in time, thinking of the next thing that we need to do, or catastrophizing the next scenario, or we are stuck in the past, dwelling on something that has happened and hasn't been resolved, and we keep looping that scenario, that state of being. But we are not present deep in our body, in the lower wisdom centers, in our felt sense. So we're not experiencing life, we're not experiencing that sacred feminine current of reality, because in order to connect to her requires total presence. She lives in the immanence, in the impermanence of life, and she lives in the body. It's when we're willing to be so present in our body, which requires being present with our feelings, with our emotions, with whatever it is arising within us at any given moment, and being so connected to this felt sense within the body. And it's from this space that we can start connecting to her. We can start feeling her. We can start experiencing her. She's not ethereal. She's not something we have to put our faith into. She is felt in the body. And when she becomes active, when she awakens, we call her Shakti, Kundalini, this yin energy, this current, this dimension of reality. She has this deeply sensual flavor, the quality. She dances through the body. She's described as a serpent because she's non-linear. When the masculine consciousness, divine masculine consciousness, is more of a linear consciousness, is the line. The feminine is the serpent. She's a circle. So she dances through your body, and she can be felt through dance, through movements, through singing. She awakens and alives through lovemaking, and she totally radically transforms our lovemaking. When it's not anymore on that focus on that peak experience and that clitoral orgasms that majority of us women familiar with. She opens the deep doorways within the body to experience depths of cervical orgasms, which is total state of bliss and communion with God consciousness and Goddess consciousness. That state of oneness that a lot of the time described, that can be attained in a meditation where you totally disconnect from your body and merge with the unified field of consciousness. It can be physically, fully experienced through lovemaking, through sacred sexuality. Of course, it requires the practice. Of course, it requires self-mastery. But this is the beauty and the gift of Divine Feminine. She is present in every aspect of our life. There is nowhere, no part of our life, no part of self that she doesn't flow through. And there is no part of us that isn't divine, that isn't sacred. The deepest shadow parts of ourselves, the ugliest parts of ourselves that we persecute, we hate about us, we don't want to admit that they exist, we want to bury them, we want to keep them a secret. She wants to love them. She wants to flow into every part of our being, every part of our body. And for us women, because we carry this deep witch wound, the wound of separation, the wound of persecution, simply for being a woman, for having a feminine body, because we endured over 500 years of persecution, of rape, of abuse, of torture, of mutilation, of brutal death. Our body carries this innate, deep wound of separation from our feminine essence, from our sensuality, from our sexuality. We quite often completely dissociated and disconnected from our womb, from our yoni, because this is the part of our body that holds this ancestral trauma, that holds the pain, the grief, the suffering. But to connect to that divine feminine aspect of ourselves, to our own sacredness, to the power of our body, to the power of our feminine energy, requires connecting to our body, to our pelvic bowl, connecting to our womb, connecting to our yoni, connecting to our entire pelvic bowl. It requires us releasing, healing the wound of separation, healing the trauma, releasing the unresolved emotions and stuck feelings, releasing outdated belief systems and conditioning, and accessing the fullness of Shakti, the fullness of that divine feminine energy, connecting to the goddess within, resurrecting that divine feminine consciousness within. And that is done. I teach that in the Vistara Feminine Embodiment School through tantric somatic yoga, through direct hands-on body work, through deep energetic practices from the priestess lineages, through shadow work done by archetypal feminine embodiment, through the journey of self-inquiry, and through powerful quantum activations. So all of those are doorways to open our body, to open our psyche, to open our entire being to that lost, buried, divine feminine consciousness aspect of God. And I call that not just something we do for ourselves, I call that an act of activism. It is something we do for the collective. It is something we do for the entire earth, for the entire planet, because it is my belief that the desecration that we see across the earth, the way we use and abuse Mother Earth, her resources, the way we abuse her species, is direct result of disconnection from the divine feminine consciousness, divine feminine aspect of reality, from the goddess, from the Gaia, from the Mother Earth, that gives life to all of form on this planet. So there is an aspect of consciousness, of divine consciousness, cosmic mother, that births soul. And there is a divine feminine aspect of Gaia, the Mother Earth, that births form, biological life. So is that desecration of feminine, divine consciousness that creates that separation from the earth's consciousness as a mother, from matter. Matter means mother. So disconnecting from the matter and placing the all emphasis on transcendence and non-physical means disconnecting from the mother, from the creatrix, from the divine feminine. Women back in the days, pre-patriarchal order and patriarchal religion, were sorcerers, shamans, highly ordained priestesses, oracles, medicine women, midwives, wild women, witches, and they were highly honored and revered within the communities. That aspect of divine feminine consciousness and the full spectrum of expression was highly honored. And with the establishment of patriarchal order and religion, we were presented with only 3 archetypes of the feminine that was acceptable. Is the virgin, the good girl, the mother, and the elder. Everything else, every other archetype of feminine was eradicated. The shamans were replaced with man figure, while you can say midwives are still predominantly women. However, it is male doctors that took charge and control in how women started to birth children, which is in a white, sterile, clinical environment and following the strict procedure and order, how it's supposed to be done. Completely disconnected from that ancient midwifery space of birthing children, which is a deep, deep spiritual initiation. The deepest one can go through is birthing non-physical into physical form. It's birthing soul into matter. The woman, when she is fully connected with her feminine essence, with the goddess within her, she goes through the direct portal or direct communion with the Holy Spirit, with the source within her. but it's virtually impossible to experience in a modern day clinical setting. So every aspect of the feminine that used to be revered, honored, and worshipped has been stripped away, ripped away from women, has been replaced by the masculine archetype, the masculine figure. And that's the desecration of the feminine that we collectively faced. So it is my belief that a resurrection of divine feminine consciousness on our planet is absolutely crucial for us as a species, not just to survive, but to thrive, for us to return back to wholeness of our sacred nature, to the wholeness and to the divinity within us. Because this is what divine feminine is teaching us, that we are sovereign beings of light, that we are spirit in form, that we are divine consciousness in the matter, in the body. And she teaches us how to embody the spirit, how to become embodied beings of light, because any form of ascension without the embodiment, without recognizing the sacredness of the body, the sacredness of life, the sacredness of earth, is a delusion, is a deception, and it's a spiritual bypassing. It's not possible. It's simply not possible. It's not possible to transcend any sin without the full embodiment, without taking body into the process and recognizing the sacredness of it, that it is equally divine. The earthly and heavenly, however you want to refer to it, non-earthly, form and non-form are equally divine. There is no separation. It's like thinking of it as a soul, spirit, the formless, the eternal, is an app. It's a program. But that app means nothing. You can't do anything with that app. You can't create, you can't implement, you can't form, you can't make anything tangible with the app without the vessel, without the computer, without the phone. And it's the same with our soul, with the spirit. Without the vessel, without the body, soul can't do anything. It remains formless. And as long as we just keep putting emphasis on the formless, but not on the importance of the vessel, that vessel is the holy grail for the holy mass to flow through, we can't achieve any more elevated states of being. We can't transcend anything. We can't evolve as a species. We can't birth new paradigms, new ways of being. It's only through embodied spirituality that it is possible. And this is where divine feminine comes in. This is what she teaches us. And if you feel called to dive deeper into feminine mysteries, if you feel called to cultivate that deep connection and relationships to your body that honors the sacredness of your feminine energy, the power of your feminine energy, if you want to embark on the path of emotional healing and reclamation and devotional return to self-love, self-worth, magnetism, radiance, authentic expression, intuitive wisdom, then I invite you to sign up for the newsletter and the wait list for when enrollment will begin for the 6-month path of feminine embodiment and reclamation in the school of Vistara Feminine Embodiment, where we'll be journeying together for 6 months in the intimate cohort of women in this beautiful journey of remembering, of reclaiming, of rebirthing. I will include the link below, and as well in the meantime, a prompt for you is to simply inquire, when I connect to a God as a feminine, as a goddess, as a divine mother, how does that feel in my body? And notice what arises for you. If there is a resistance, if there is a fear, if there is longing, and just journal on it, because that will show you as well where conditioning lies, where belief systems are, and what your body, your system resonates with. How does that feel or land in your body? And please feel free to share it, as well as let me know what topics within the feminine and embodiment would you like to explore, and I will create more videos. As well, I will be offering this series of body work, because the tantric and somatic yoga with the focus on the feminine pelvis is the big part of the feminine embodiment and reclamation, and it's another doorway for us to access the Shakti energy, to access the goddess within. Thank you so much for stopping by and listening, and have a wonderful day.